Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Thursday. It's March 24th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And I thought I'd start with the daily chart. Maybe we're moving towards this measured move up here. I really thought we'd probably see a sideways day as we got some consolidation and maybe even sell off some today. But no, this day traded straight up and almost closed on its high. Actually, I haven't closed yet, but right now we're trading at the highs. So pretty impressive that we continue to not sell off yet. So we'll just have to see what happens here. It doesn't mean we're still not coming back to test this yet. We could turn down tomorrow and the bottom fall out of it, but for now we're still, we're still pushing higher. So the path of least resistance, I would think, would be to the downside, but that doesn't mean we're not going higher. So never rule out a market can always move further than you think it will. So even though we're pretty much in oversold territory, we could push on up and test this measured move here, and that may be where we're headed. So anyway, I was a little surprised the day ended the way it did, but here it is. So you can't argue with, don't argue with the market just because you suspect something and you think the chart's telling you something doesn't mean anything. So always go with what you see, not what you think. So you obviously want to think ahead, and most of the time you'll probably be right if you're pretty good at chart reading, but sometimes the market will trick you. So the market's good at that. So especially on the daily chart, it's a little harder to, because it takes a day, whole day to get one bar. So it takes a little while to kind of, this might happen in 15 or 20 minutes on the 2,000 tick chart, but this takes 3 or 4 days for this to set up here. So you got to be a little more patient with the daily chart. You got to be a little bit, you got to hone in a little bit more and wait for a better setup. So anyway, you can see it here. Let's switch over to the 2,000 tick chart. And here's our 2,000 tick intraday chart. And you can see we had a couple of legs up. And then we had a couple of shorter measured legs here. But once you got this leg and we corrected back here and headed higher again, you'd look for a measured leg on that. It looked like we were going to have a range day really in here. And then we broke out, and of course, a measured moves right along here, and we continued to push higher and made that second leg up. So, that it fooled you in more ways than one, because if you measure this leg, you're thinking, nah, there's no way we're going that high, and look, we're here. So, pay attention to those measured moves because it's amazing how accurate they are. I started out with this range like this, and that gives you a measured move here, which is about where we went to on this breakout. But later in the day, I moved it up when we bounced right across here. I moved it up a little bit like so. And you can see that fits really well. And that still gives you this measured move. Looks like we just had a little overshoot. So I think this lower line was more correct. And so that's the way I ended the day with it like that. Actually, when we bounced here, I kind of pulled it up, and then when we bounced again, you know for sure it's probably the support's right across there. And then that kind of makes that measured move make sense with the failed breakout a couple of times. And so in the end, what you probably have is you have a range that's like so. And this is what we thought was the highs is the midline. And we broke out this afternoon and we made this leg up, and then we broke out this afternoon and made this remainder of this leg up, and you can see we've shot high. Oops, we've shot higher again. So interesting day so far. But let's back out. And the thing about it is, because you didn't turn consistently at some of these places. I mean, we kind of turned consistently off the highs until after about 10 o'clock. But when we bounced off these lows, they're different spots, and so they're not real consistent. We're down here, we're up here, and then this one went a little bit lower here again. When you're not turning at consistent places, it makes it a little harder to trade the support and resistance lines of a range. You kind of have to almost play the trend lines within it, so just keep that in mind. But let's back out or zoom in here, and we'll go through the trades. Okay, 7 o'clock came right in here in this congestion area. I went ahead and marked this trade. You can see that you got a double top and you try to go higher once, twice. So when it broke lower there, that's a failure. If you were already at your desk, you could take that trade as a failure. I marked it green. It's a little bit early, and the way it kind of sets up here, it looks a little congested. So, but if you wait just a few minutes, you get a second entry short here with a big bearish bar, and that's the better entry. Notice the new low, first entry, and when it breaks lower there, second entry short. Quick, easy move, and then we bounce. And you can see we bounced a little higher here, and that's higher than this, and then we bounced lower, which that's lower than this one, but still higher than this one, and then we turned down, we went lower again and bounced, still not here. Uh, Maybe a double bottom there. So these bottoms are kind of hard. These lows are kind of hard to trade, and we're not really going back to the highs yet. So we're still kind of working lower here. We're really still in somewhat of a downtrend right here. So you always got to be thinking about the bigger bias. But we bounced, turned down again. So you got a low first entry, and then it actually was a second entry when it triggered right there, but that's just too congested. But when it breaks higher here and fails and turns down and gives you that big bearish bar, I like going short there. That's a triple test. You made the high, you tested it once, you tested it twice, and you got this big, the real key is this big bearish bar, and you did break a little higher there, so you're probably going to trap the longs. It took this a minute to get going, but notice what happens too. You get a first entry, and then it breaks higher here, and you get a second entry, and it turns down and gives you another bearish bar. So another good place to go low, go short, and then we run on down here, and it looks like we're going to bounce right at these lows. It doesn't though. Pushes on down. You do get a higher low here, but that's just too congested. You get another higher low here, but it's right into the previous support. It's kind of acting as resistance. It's right into the EMA. So I think you got to wait. And then you come up here and you make this little double top. Then you get a first entry and you get a second entry. And notice how it bounces right off the previous support. Gives you a nice bullish bar. I like that on the second entry long. And you're looking for a retest of the high based on this little channel here, and that being a break with two legs of correction. And that turns out to be a pretty good move. You could get a runner on that one most likely. It pulls back, goes higher, breaks out again. And see, that's the thing. This is a range here, but the highs are not very consistent. You've got a double top here, then you go higher, and then you go lower, and then you make a higher low here, and then it shoots out here. You can see the EMA is still kind of pointing up, so there's an upward bias here, even though this is sideways stuff. So you have to keep that in mind as well. I just don't see any other. You might have taken this lower high. I didn't mark it, but you might have taken it. There's plenty of room back to the EMA. There are two legs up here, so it's another one you might take. But we just came off the lows of the range, and if this is going to be a range day, you're really looking for prices to come back to the highs. And so that makes me a little leery of that trade right there, or wary of it. So there's a little zigzag trap right here, and you can see that obviously trapped people. Look how that shoots up real fast. That was a nice trap. Notice how that lower high and it breaks lower and turns up. You might have traded that. I wouldn't wait till here to go long, but you might have traded that on the engulfing bar. I didn't mark it, but that's obviously probably going to be a nice trap there. We run up, we get a close outside a new high, and then we're working lower. And I don't think you want to go short here. There may be room to get out. It would have worked anyway, but I still don't think you want to take it. You get what looks like a failure here, but again, it's a lot of sideways stuff, and it doesn't trigger until over here. And so that's why I marked it over here. I don't know if I would have gone short right there, but when it broke higher again, and then your failure is technically here, I like that trade. It still took a minute, but it finally drops on down, turns out to be a nice trade. And then you get a first entry, second entry, but the way I looked at that was it was more like this is just a move up with a first entry and a second entry here. But you could treat this like a failed second entry long too, because this is basically a double top, first entry, second entry. But I really am trading this on a second entry and a little bit of a trap there, knowing that we aren't down to the lows yet. And again, at one time, this point, I probably still had these lows down here. So I was thinking I had a lot more room than I actually do there. And you get a triple test right here. You make that low. You test it once, you test it twice. But you made a lower low there. And generally, you want to wait on a higher low before you do that. And that doesn't come till here. I don't think you want to wait till here to trade that. You could. It's a really bullish bar, and you can see we bounced off the lows. So you might mark that green and this one green too. I'm not that crazy about. I really like this trade, but that's just really big bar to be taken like that. I mean, it's 17 ticks, which is not that big in comparison to what we've been getting, but it's a fairly big signal bar. So runs on up, and then it comes back and gives you a first entry, second entry, and you're looking for a new high here. We hadn't reached the highs of the range, which this was the highs at that point, which is the midline now. So I like that trade. And you come back and you get another second entry, but this is your signal bar, and this is just an inside bar. It's all below the EMA as well. Turns out to be a great move, but the rules tell us we can't take that trade, and so we don't take it. And just because it takes off, don't let that bother you, because the next time you'll take the trade because you saw it take off without you this time, and guess what will happen to you next time? You end up with a loser. So anyway, you make another first entry, second entry. I didn't like this one because it's right back into the support, and could be a failure. And it would have worked, but it comes back and it gives you a little higher low here, but it doesn't break higher, and then gives you the inside bar, and they both got stem on them closing below the EMA. Again, you just can't go long right there. And I don't see any shorts. You might have said, hey, this is a failed second entry long on a breakout. And so you might have taken that trade. But again, I'm just not crazy about it. It's not a certainty that we're probably going to come back to the EMA and test this. And if you got enough room, maybe you're okay. But it's not a high probability entry. So, and then of course we break out. You get a first entry and a second entry, and it's right off. Well, you really didn't have this trend line confirmed yet, so it's just the first two swings. But it's a failed second entry short, and the market's trying to go higher, and it's a really good signal bar. Of course, we don't care too much about the signal bar on a failure, so that's not that relevant. But you can tell it went lower here and reversed and closed on this very high. That's a good sign, and it does take off. And there's actually two legs back to the trend line here, but it looks more like congestion to me. And when this one didn't break higher, that gives you real concern that now you got a two-bar matching high that it could break higher and turn down and come back to the EMA and make that next leg down. So I don't think you can take that either. And it does run up a measured move and actually push on through. And it fails on the breakout. And you try to go higher once, and you never did break higher here. You do get this big bearish bar. So, and technically that was the first entry, and then it went higher again, and then it turned down. So you might even treat that like a second entry. It's just so congested, I'd just skip it and wait. See if you get a lower high, and you just don't get it. We're all the way back down here. Now here's another one. I did not mark this trade because it didn't make a new high. It didn't even make an equal high, but that still looks like two legs back to the EMA in a very weak correction. So if that would have made a matching high or even a new high, I'd have told you to take that trade there. And you might even still consider it, but that makes it super aggressive because you're really skipping a lot of rules to try to trade that. So I didn't mark it, and I think you're better off not to. And of course we run on down. We bounce off the midline. What was previously the resistance of the range turns out to be the midline in the end, and we bounce, and you get a first entry, and then you try to go higher, and you get a second entry with a big bearish bar. I like that one. You would have got your scalp out of this, but it bounced really quickly and went higher, and I was a little surprised at that, but it still works. But it's it's just one of those trades. It's just one of those trades that works out. But that's why we normally only go for 4 ticks, because we found that we can get that more times than not on a second entry. So you would have got your scalp. I'm not sure if you were trying to get 2 points if you'd have got that one. Nope, so you wouldn't have made it at 2 points. But that's why I like to scout for 4 ticks. And I don't think I would trade that as a failure either, because it's below the EMA. It doesn't set up properly. So run on up, then you come out, you get a first entry, second entry, another nice second entry here, but that's an inside bar and it doesn't make an equal low. So by the rules, you can't take that trade. But if you're just patient, a few minutes later, you get a first entry short, a second entry short. And so you get a failed second entry short that confirms the trend line right at the EMA as well. So I like going long there. Runs up, pulls back, makes one more run higher, and then it turns down. There's a lower high right here, but it's right into the EMA. And I think you want to wait on a second entry, which you don't get till here. And notice you get a first entry, second entry, but that's your signal bar, and it's too bullish. And you just don't, you're just kind of chopping lower here, and I just don't see anything I really like. So you finally bottom, you get a first entry and then a second entry. And again, I didn't mark it because it's a lot of sideways stuff right there. It looks like I didn't mark this range, but I believe there's a little range going on there. And you can see that. And so and for that reason, you just got to be really careful here. So this turns out this is a little failed break lower. And then we break out of there and take off. Again, I just don't think you can take that trade right there because the signal bar is not very good. It takes off. We do pull back here and just continues to go higher. I didn't draw my trend line here. There's a little micro trend channel here. And of course, you get a break and a new high, and then we kind of sold off there. And that was the measured move. We ended up going much higher. You get a little two-legged correction, and then you go higher again. And I'm guessing if you measure this leg, we haven't quite gotten a measured move on that, and we may not. But I would look for that anyway. But that took you into 230, and that pretty much wrapped it up for today. I just don't see anything else up to here that I really like. Not a great trading day because it's more of a range day that you would think would have a downward bias that ends up with an upward bias. So it kind of, and where it bounces and turns, there's no consistency. And even the trends are not consistent. We trend up here and then we sell off just as hard, and then we trend back up and then we sell off. And these days are harder to trade. They just are. They're harder to trade. So, but anyway, today's Thursday, so no chart lessons on Friday. So we won't trade tomorrow, or no chart lesson tomorrow. I'm not saying I won't trade tomorrow, but I don't do a chart lesson on Fridays anymore. So. Anyway, I hope you had a good trading week. I hope tomorrow's good for you and you have a great weekend, and we'll be back again to do it Monday. But I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next